Ivan lived in a small town far away from the hustle and bustle of the big cities. He was already 70 years old, and his life flowed smoothly and quietly. After the death of his wife 5 years ago, he finally withdrew into himself, becoming a lonely old man who rarely left the house, unless it was necessary to buy groceries or medicine. His days passed alone, and he felt more and more like life was gradually leaving him. The town where Ivan lived was small, with a population of no more than 1,000 people. Most of its inhabitants were elderly people, and young people had long ago left to study or work in large cities. People here knew each other, and any event quickly became a subject of discussion. So when a young African girl appeared in the town, it did not go unnoticed. Her name was Amina, and she had come here to study at the local university, which, despite its modesty, offered unique programs that attracted students from all over the world. Amina was different from the rest of the residents, not only because of her skin color, but also because of the vibrancy and energy she literally radiated. She could always be seen on the street, either in conversation with locals or reading a book in a small park. She quickly became a prominent figure in this quiet corner of the world, and many of the locals, who at first were wary of her, soon became accustomed to her presence. Ivan first saw Amina when he was on his way to the local store to buy groceries. It was an ordinary day for him, and, as always, he walked at a leisurely pace through the narrow streets of the town. The store was in the center, on the main street, and at this time of day, it was usually quite crowded. Ivan didn't like crowds, so he tried to do his shopping as quickly as possible and go home. As Ivan walked out of the store with 2 heavy bags in his hands, he felt his legs start to shake. He was no longer as strong as he used to be, and often found it difficult to do the simplest everyday tasks. This time it seemed to him that he would not be able to carry his purchases home. Amina at this time also came out of the store. She noticed Ivan and saw how hard it was for him to walk with his bags. Without hesitation, she approached him and offered her help.
"Excuse me, can I help you?"
she asked in a soft voice, leaning slightly toward him. Ivan raised his head and met her eyes. He hadn't expected such an offer, and at first he didn't even understand what she said. Her accent, though light, still gave away the foreigner, and Ivan hesitated for a moment.
"Shall I help you carry the bags?"
Amina repeated, seeing his confusion. Ivan hesitated, but nodded.
"Yes, if it's not too much trouble,"
he answered quietly, handing her one of the bags.
"Of course, it's not difficult."
She smiled, accepting the package.
"Where do you need to go?"
"Just a couple blocks from here."
Ivan pointed toward his street.
"Thank you. D."
They walked together through the narrow streets, and Ivan noticed how easily and casually Amina carried the heavy bag. He felt a little embarrassed, but at the same time he was pleased that someone had decided to help him.
"My name is Amina,"
she said, breaking the silence.
"I've recently moved here to study. And you must be a local?"
"Yes, my name is Ivan.
He answered, smiling slightly.
I've been living here for many years. It's a small town. Everyone knows each other."
"It's so cozy."
Amina said warmly.
"I like it here very much, although it was a little lonely at first. There aren't many people my age here."
"That's true.
Ivan agreed.
It's mostly old people here, and the young people have moved away."
Amina nodded, and for a while they walked in silence. It was a little unusual for Ivan to talk to such a young and energetic girl. His mind flashed with thoughts of how different they were, he an old man who had lived a long and difficult life, and she young, full of hopes and dreams. But at the same time he felt that Amina had offered to help him for a reason. There was a special kindness in her eyes that penetrated into his heart.
"What are you studying?"
Ivan finally asked, trying to keep the conversation going.
"I am studying art history."
Amina answered with enthusiasm.
"There is a wonderful professor here whom I really wanted to listen to. He is a real expert in his field."
Ivan nodded, saying goodbye to her. He stood at the threshold of his house and watched Amina walk away down the street, walking lightly and gracefully, as if nature itself favored her. Her figure gradually disappeared from sight, but a slight sadness remained in Ivan's soul. This short conversation reminded him of how little joy there had been in his life in recent years, how he had withdrawn into his loneliness and forgotten about simple human joys. Back home, Ivan thought about his meeting with Amina for a long time. It was hard for him to understand why this girl had struck him so much. Maybe it was her kindness and attention to his needs. Maybe it was her cheerfulness, which was so lacking in his life. Or maybe it was something that went beyond ordinary communication. From that day on, Ivan began to notice Amina more often. Sometimes they met at the store, sometimes in the park or on the street. She always greeted him with a smile, and he reciprocated, feeling his heart grow warmer each time. Gradually, a friendship based on respect and mutual understanding developed between them. Ivan, without expecting it, found in Amin what he had long lost: the joy of communication and the feeling that he is not alone in this world. Thus began a story that seemed impossible. A story in which an elderly man and a young girl from different worlds found something dear in each other. Their paths crossed at the right moment to fill each other's lives with new meaning and warmth. After their first meeting, Ivan and Amina began to run into each other more and more often. At first it was chance encounters in a store or on the street, but gradually they began to meet on purpose. Ivan, who used to prefer solitude, began to find pleasure in socializing with Amina. She was that bright ray of light which he lacked in the grey everyday life. Every day their friendship grew stronger. They often walked in the local park, which was a quiet and secluded place, especially in the mornings. Ivan loved this time, when nature woke up with him, when the cool morning air invigorated his old body. Amina found in these walks an opportunity to relax from her studies and enjoy the tranquility of a small town, where life flowed in its own rhythm, not subject to the bustle of the big world. One day, when the sun was already sinking, Ivan and Amina met again in the park. They were sitting on a bench under an old oak tree, enjoying the quiet evening. Ivan looked wistfully at the fallen leaves that the wind played in front of their feet.
It's so peaceful here.
Ivan said quietly, breaking the silence.
I often came here with my wife. We liked to walk in the park, to sit here, under this tree.
Amina nodded, realizing that these memories were dear to him.
How long were you married?
She asked carefully, so as not to hurt his feelings.
52 years.
Ivan answered, his voice trembling from the flood of memories.
She was my support, my friend and life partner. After she left, I couldn't find a place for a long time, as if I had lost a part of myself.
Amina listened to him in silence. It was hard for her to imagine such a long and deep connection, because she was still so young and had only a few short relationships in her life. But she felt the depth and pain of Ivan's loss, and her heart squeezed with pity.
It must have been very hard,
she said softly.
to lose someone you love more than life.
Ivan nodded sadly.
Yes, it was hard. But life goes on. Though I admit the world is different without her. Empty.
He was silent for a moment, and then continued.
But ever since I met you, Amina, I began to feel that not all is lost. You have a vitality about you that I haven't felt around me in a long time. Thank you for that.
Amina smiled touchingly and touched his hand lightly.
Thank you, Ivan. It wasn't easy for me when I came here either. I'm far away from home, from my family. Everything here is new and unfamiliar, but you made it easier for me to adapt. You have become like my own.
Ivan looked at her in surprise.
Native?
He asked her again, hardly believing that he could be important to anyone but his memories.
Yes, native.
Amina confirmed.
You have what I lack here: wisdom, kindness, understanding. You share your memories with me, and I learn from you. This is valuable to me.
They continued to sit on the bench in silence, and that silence was filled with warmth and understanding. In these moments, a special bond developed between them that went beyond ordinary friendship. Their meetings began to take on a ritual character. In the mornings they would walk in the park, and in the evenings they would often meet at Ivan's house to have tea together. Amina would bring sweets, and Ivan would make herbal tea, which he had prepared while his wife was still alive. These tea parties became an important part of their socializing. In Ivan's warm kitchen they shared their stories, thoughts and dreams. One day, after a walk, Ivan invited Amina for tea, as had become a habit. As they sat down at the table, Amina noticed an old photograph on the shelf that showed a young Ivan and his wife.
Is that your wife?
She asked, pointing to the photo. Ivan nodded and took the photo in his hands with a slight smile.
Yes, that's Olga.
He said fondly.
It was at our wedding. We were young and hopeful then. Time flies so fast.
Amina scrutinized the photograph.
It's very beautiful,
she said.
Yes.
Ivan agreed.
And she had a good heart. She always helped people, never complained. I still can't understand how I was so lucky to meet her.
Amina was silent, feeling that for Ivan these memories were both joyful and painful at the same time. She realized that a person who lived a long life held many such stories that shaped his personality. It was important for her, a young girl, to hear these stories to better understand Ivan and his world.
Ivan, tell me more about your childhood,
she suggested, changing the subject to a lighter one.
You grew up here, in this city, didn't you?
Ivan smiled, remembering his childhood.
Yes, I was born and raised here. It was a very different city then. Fewer cars, more fields and forests. We boys used to run around the neighborhood all day long, playing hide and seek, swimming in the river. There were no televisions or telephones, and we found joy in simple things.
As Amina listened to him, she found herself thinking about how different her own childhood was from what Ivan had described. She had grown up in a big city, surrounded by technology and people. But despite that, she felt that their childhoods were similar in some ways after all. She, like Ivan, had sought happiness in simple things.
It was a wonderful time.
Ivan continued.
The world seemed so huge and full of possibilities. I dreamed of traveling, of seeing the world, but life turned out differently. War, work, family. It all kind of crowded out the dreams.
But you still saw a lot of interesting things.
Amina supported him.
And your life is full of memories that you can share.
Yes, you're right.
Ivan agreed.
I am glad that I have lived such a life. I may not have realized all my dreams, but I don't regret anything. What about you, Amina? What are your dreams?
Amina thought for a moment before answering.
I have always dreamed of studying art, traveling the world, seeing the most famous museums and galleries. But most importantly, I want to bring something of myself into this world, to make something meaningful that will remain after me.
Ivan nodded with approval.
That's a wonderful dream,
he said.
I'm sure you can achieve it. You are young, you have every chance.
Amina smiled.
Thank you, Ivan. Your words mean a lot to me.
So, over tea and conversation, their evenings passed. They shared their dreams and memories, gradually revealing their souls to each other. The difference in age and culture, which at first seemed to be a barrier, gradually disappeared, giving way to sincere mutual understanding. Over time, their communication became not just a habit, but a necessity. Ivan waited to meet Amina, knowing that these conversations gave him strength and gave meaning to his life. Amina, for her part, found in communication with Ivan not only a source of wisdom, but also a true friendship, which she lacked in her new place. One day, when they were sitting again over a cup of tea, Ivan suddenly said,
You know, Amina, I never thought I could find a friend like you again. You make me feel alive.
Amina, touched by his words, took his hand and said,
And I never thought I would find a friend as wise and kind as you, Ivan. You have changed my life.
Ivan smiled back at her, feeling his heart fill with warmth. After several months of regular meetings and conversations, Ivan and Amina became much closer. Something in their relationship had changed. They were no longer just casual acquaintances, but much closer, almost like family. Their communication was no longer limited to conversations about everyday affairs or studies. Now they shared their innermost thoughts and memories with each other, which helped them to understand and feel each other better. For Ivan, these meetings became a real escape from loneliness. After the death of his wife, he felt lost and lonely. His days stretched slowly and monotonously, and memories of the past only increased the sense of loss. In Amin, he found not only an interesting interlocutor, but also a listener to whom he could confide his experiences and thoughts. Ivan began to tell her stories from his life, shared his memories of childhood, war, post-war years, how he met his wife, their life together. These stories were full of different emotions. Ivan recalled his childhood with nostalgia and warmth. The town where he grew up was very different then, full of life and energy. He recalled how he and his friends used to run through the fields, swim in the river, pick berries in the forest. It was a time when everything seemed simple and carefree, when every day brought new discoveries and joy. Ivan recalled with special warmth his parents, who, despite difficult times, always found a way to support their children, to give them a piece of joy and love. However, not all of Ivan's memories were so joyful. He often returned his thoughts to the years of war, which left an indelible mark on his life. As a young boy, he was drafted to the front, and there he saw all the horrors of war. These memories were hard, but Ivan knew that they were part of his life, and he shared them with Amina, feeling that she could understand him. The war had changed him, made him tougher and stronger, but also taught him to appreciate life, every moment of peacetime. When Ivan talked about those years, his voice became muffled and thoughtful. There was pain and fatigue, but also pride that he was able to survive, go through all this and return home. These stories were a kind of therapy for Ivan. They helped him to reflect on his life path, to accept it, and to come to terms with the fact that everything happened the way it happened. Amina listened to him attentively and with interest. She realized that for Ivan these memories were of great value, that they shaped his personality, his view of the world. She often thought about how little she knew about the world, about those times which for Ivan were reality. She had seen a lot of pain and suffering in Africa too, but this was a different pain, a different ordeal. She told Ivan about her life in Africa, about growing up in a small village where life was hard but full of simple joys. Amina grew up in a large family where every day was a struggle for survival. Her village often lacked food, clean water, and medical care, but despite this, people lived and enjoyed every day. Amina recalled how she and other children would run through the fields, help their parents on the farm, play simple games and sing songs. These memories were bright and warm, despite the hardships. However, Amina's life was not always joyful. She told Ivan about the hardships she faced when she decided to study. Education in her country was not accessible to everyone, especially girls. Despite all the difficulties, Amina's parents supported her desire to get an education, even though it was not easy. There was a shortage of textbooks and constant power cuts, but Amina was persistent and persevering, knowing that education was her chance for a better life. When she entered university and got the opportunity to go abroad to study, it was a real miracle for her. However, adapting to a new place was not as easy as she thought it would be. She felt like a stranger in a small European town, far away from home, family, and friends. She had to face prejudice, misunderstanding, loneliness. These difficulties sometimes seemed insurmountable, and there were moments when Amina wanted to give up everything and return home. But meeting Ivan changed many things. In him she found support, which she lacked in this new and alien world. He understood her, listened to her, helped her cope with difficulties, shared his experience. Ivan became for Amina not just a friend, but a mentor, a person who guided her, gave her advice, helped her to realize what was happening. Ivan, for his part, felt that his life had found meaning again. He was glad that he could be useful, that his experience and knowledge were needed by someone. Communicating with Amina helped him realize that despite his age, he could still give a lot to others, that his life did not end with the death of his wife. This new friendship, based on mutual understanding and support, became a real source of inspiration and joy for Ivan. Gradually their meetings became more than just socializing. They began to help each other in different aspects of life. Amina helped Ivan to cope with household difficulties, helped him with shopping, and sometimes cooked national dishes for him, which he tasted with interest. Ivan, in turn, became a real mentor for Amina, helping her to understand complex issues, giving her advice and supporting her in her studies. They became true friends, people who could rely on each other in a difficult moment. Amina no longer felt lonely and lost in a foreign country, and Ivan began to feel the taste for life again. They found in each other what they had been looking for so long: understanding, care and support. Ivan learned to realize that the world is not limited to his town, that there are other countries, cultures, other views on life. Amina realized that old age is not only infirmity and loneliness, that at any age you can be useful and needed, that friendship knows no boundaries neither by age nor by nationality. This relationship became for them a real gift of fate. Each of them found in the other what made their life fuller and richer. Ivan and Amina became a support for each other, which helped them to cope with difficulties and overcome life's obstacles. They became not just friends, but part of each other's lives, people without whom this life would be incomplete and not so bright. Ivan started to leave the house more, to go out more often. His life was filled with new meanings and impressions. Amina became more confident in herself. It was easier for her to adapt to the new life. She felt that there was a person who would always support, listen, and help. This relationship, built on mutual understanding, trust, and respect, became the foundation on which their friendship was built. Each of them found in the other something native, something that helped them to live and enjoy life, despite all the difficulties and obstacles. Thus, Ivan and Amina became the people who could support each other in any situation, give advice, just listen to each other. They became those who helped to overcome life's challenges, who shared joys and sorrows. Their friendship became an example of how two different lives, two different worlds can unite and create something valuable and important for both of them. As Ivan and Amina's friendship began to grow stronger, they began to spend more time together, and this did not go unnoticed by the people of the small town. In a place like this, where everyone knew each other, any change in routine attracted attention, and soon their relationship became a topic of discussion among the locals. At first, it was just casual glances and whispers behind their backs. Some residents wondered how Ivan, who had always lived a quiet and secluded life after his wife's death, suddenly started spending so much time with a young girl, and even one as unusual as Amina. Most of them did not know how to react to such a friendship, for they had never encountered such situations. For people who grew up and lived all their lives in one small town, such relationships seemed something strange and even suspicious. Gradually, however, these whispers began to turn into open condemnation. Gossip about Ivan and Amina's friendship became the main source of conversation on the streets, in the stores, and at the market. People discussed how Ivan could do such a thing. Many wondered why he would want to associate with such a young girl. The questions multiplied, and in each story, in each conversation, new details appeared, often far from the truth. One of the main sources of discontent was that Amina was African. To the people of this town, who rarely encountered people of a different race, this seemed something unnatural. Many perceived Amina as an outsider who could not possibly be part of their closed and conservative community. This foreignness increased fear and distrust, which was only fueled by rumors and speculation. In addition, the significant age difference between Ivan and Amina raised even more questions and suspicions in people's minds. In their eyes, such a friendship seemed inappropriate. They believed that Ivan, as an older man, should not have such a close relationship with a young girl. Many believed that there could be nothing in common between them, and did not understand how such a connection could have arisen. As time went on, the judgment became more explicit. People who used to greet Ivan in a friendly manner now passed by, barely nodding in his direction. Some even stopped saying hello altogether, ignoring him, as if he no longer existed for them. In the stores, the salespeople were less friendly, their looks saying more than words. At the market, Ivan was increasingly refused concessions or help, and he felt unfriendly glances when he bought food. Amina also noticed a change in attitude. Although she was new here and had not had time to make many acquaintances, she felt that she had become the object of scrutiny and, more importantly, rejection. Locals who had previously looked at her with curiosity and perhaps even benevolence now avoided contact. It became difficult for her to feel comfortable on the streets of the town, where every person she met seemed to condemn her with a mere glance. For Ivan, this judgment was painful and unexpected. He had lived in this town his whole life, knew almost all the residents, and had always felt a part of this community. He had grown up here, worked here, started a family here, buried his wife here. It seemed to him that over the years he had gained the respect and understanding of his neighbors. But now, because of this friendship, which he thought was honest and pure, Ivan faced misunderstanding and even hostility from people he considered friends and neighbors. At first, Ivan tried to ignore what was happening. He convinced himself that it was just a temporary phenomenon, that people would get used to it and realize that there was nothing wrong with their relationship with Amina. However, as time went on, he began to notice that the situation was only getting worse. Neighbors with whom he used to have conversations now refused to even talk to him, and old friends began to avoid meeting. He realized that their friendship with Amina had become a kind of challenge to the patterns and traditions of this small, conservative society. Rumors spread even among those who were not directly related to Ivan and Amina. Local cafes and streets discussed their relationship, and each new rumor added fuel to the fire of public discontent. Some even began to speculate that there might be more than just friendship between Ivan and Amina. These speculations, of course, were far from reality, but they only added to the negative attitude of those around them. While Ivan tried to remain calm, realizing that his friendship with Amina had become a target for social stigma, this situation was especially difficult for Amina. She had come here to study, to start a new life, away from home, where she had always felt the support and warmth of her family. But now she faced misunderstanding and hostility that seemed unreasonable and unfair. For a young girl who was already in a foreign country and trying to adapt to a new environment, this social pressure was a serious challenge. Amina tried to ignore the rumors, but it was hard for her to remain indifferent to the ill will that surrounded her. Talk about her friendship with Ivan began to appear in university circles, and even though professors and students were not so much involved in the city gossip, it still affected her studies and general state of mind. It became difficult for her to concentrate on her studies, constantly feeling judgmental looks on her and realizing that she was being discussed behind her back. The hardest thing for Ivan was realizing that the people he thought were his friends did not support him. No one tried to get his point of view. No one asked why their friendship with Amina had become so important to him. He began to feel isolated, lonely, as if the whole world had turned its back on him. These changes took a heavy toll on his well-being, and he began to leave the house less often, becoming more and more withdrawn. Amina, seeing how Ivan was suffering from public condemnation, was also worried. She felt guilty that their friendship was the cause of his problems, and this depressed her even more. However, she realized that their relationship meant a great deal to Ivan and could not just walk out of his life to avoid causing him more trouble. This societal opposition exacerbated Ivan's internal conflict. On the one hand, he did not want to give up his friendship with Amina, who had become a source of joy and support for him. But on the other hand, he could not help but notice how their relationship was destroying his life and reputation in the eyes of others. He was faced with a difficult choice to continue their friendship despite the condemnation, or to give in to societal pressure and give up a relationship that had become important to him. This confrontation caused Ivan deep distress. He increasingly recalled his youth, times when he had to make difficult decisions, when he faced hardships and challenges. These memories helped him to gather his thoughts, to realize that in his life there were always moments when he had to go against public opinion. But then, in his youth, he had the support of his wife, who was always there to help him cope with difficulties. Now Ivan was alone. He felt vulnerable to public pressure, and it was hard for him to find the strength to resist it. But despite this, he realized that he could not simply give up his friendship with Amina. She became something more than just a friend to him. She gave him back his faith in himself, in his strength, in the fact that life could go on, despite all the losses and difficulties. Ivan realized that their friendship with Amina was a challenge to the traditional way of life in this small town, and that people who were used to certain norms and orders were not ready to accept something new and unusual. He was painfully aware that because of this their relationship was becoming a target for judgment and gossip, but he also realized that he had to make a choice, either continue to live according to the laws of society or follow his heart, even if it meant facing judgment and misunderstanding. Thus, the confrontation of society became a serious test for Ivan and Amina, a test of the strength of their friendship. They were faced with an election that could change their lives forever, and each of them had to decide how to act in this difficult situation. After a long period in which their friendship with Amina was growing stronger and more meaningful, Ivan and Amina began to face internal doubts and disagreements. The pressure from society, which had previously only indirectly affected their relationship, now became a serious challenge. It began to penetrate their souls, undermining their confidence in the rightness of their bond and causing them to fear the consequences. For Ivan, this period was particularly difficult. Despite his best efforts to ignore the judgment and gossip that was going around, he began to feel increasingly insecure. Years ago, when he was younger, Ivan was used to moving forward with determination, overcoming any difficulties. But now that his age was telling him to be cautious and measured, he began to think more and more often that their friendship with Amina might do more harm than good. Ivan could not get rid of the thought that his intimacy with the young African girl was frowned upon and even despised by others. He began to think more about how their relationship might affect Amina's reputation, her future. She was young, energetic, and full of hope for the future. Ivan realized that public opinion in their small town could hurt her badly, especially since she had come here to study and build her life. It pained him to realize that he might be jeopardizing Amina's future without wanting to. Ivan realized that their friendship, so important to him, could become an obstacle in her path. These thoughts began to slowly eat away at him from the inside, generating feelings of guilt and responsibility. A contradiction arose in Ivan's soul. On the one hand, he did not want to give up this friendship, which had become for him a real salvation from loneliness. But on the other hand, he could not ignore the possible consequences for Amina. At the same time, Amina too was beginning to have doubts. Every day she found it more and more difficult to ignore the judgmental looks and unkind remarks. She felt that she was becoming an object of discussion, and that their friendship with Ivan was causing more and more questions and perplexity among people. At university, she noticed that some students began to treat her with suspicion, and professors, though still professional, sometimes hinted that she needed to be more careful in her choice of friends. Amina began to wonder what their friendship with Ivan looked like from the outside. She realized that to many people their relationship seemed unusual, if not strange. There were few people in their town who could understand or accept such a friendship, and this made Amina think more and more often that perhaps she and Ivan had crossed some invisible boundary, broken the unwritten rules of the society in which they lived. For Amina, who had fought for her rights and freedoms all her life, it was hard for her to recognize that the opinion of others had such a strong influence on her. She had always considered herself independent and free, but now, faced with judgment and misunderstanding, she began to feel vulnerable and unprotected. A sense of anxiety and insecurity grew in Amina's soul. She did not know how to cope with these feelings, how to find a balance between her inner world and external circumstances. These doubts began to reflect on their relationship. Ivan became more withdrawn. He went for walks with Amina less often, avoided long conversations, more often secluded in his house, immersed in thoughts that their friendship might be a mistake. He became more cautious in his statements, trying not to hurt Amina, but at the same time feeling that some invisible wall was appearing between them. Amina, seeing the changes in Ivan's behavior, also began to feel insecure. She realized that their relationship was changing, that doubts and fears were beginning to grip them both. She began to notice that Ivan was no longer as open as he used to be, that he was trying to keep his distance. This frustrated and frightened her, because she didn't want to lose this bond that had become an important support for her in a new and unfamiliar world. Every day their doubts grew stronger. Ivan became more and more convinced that their friendship could harm Amina, and this guilt became unbearable for him. He began to think that perhaps it would be better if they stopped communicating, if Amina found new friends, those who would understand her better and could support her in her studies and life in a foreign country. Amina, for her part, began to think more and more about her future. She realized that their friendship with Ivan had become a source of joy as well as difficulties. She felt that their relationship would not be accepted by society, that they would always face misunderstanding and judgment. She was afraid to think that perhaps she had made a mistake in allowing herself such a close friendship with a man who was not only much older, but also belonged to a different world, a different culture. These thoughts and fears began to gradually destroy their relationship from within. Each of them felt that something had changed, that their friendship was not what it used to be. They began to meet less often, and each time they did, they were filled with tension and reticence. Ivan and Amina could no longer talk openly with each other as they used to. They began to avoid topics that could cause even more misunderstandings and disagreements. Ivan thought more and more often about the right thing to do. He felt that he had to make a decision, but he didn't know which one. It was hard for him to even imagine life without Amina, but at the same time he realized that their friendship had become a source of suffering for both of them. These thoughts tormented him, made him wake up at night and think long and hard about the best course of action. Amina, too, was at a crossroads. She realized that her friendship with Ivan had become an important part of her life, but at the same time she was afraid that this friendship could lead to more problems. She didn't want to jeopardize her future, but she couldn't just give up on Ivan, who had become more than just a friend to her. These internal disagreements and doubts were tearing her apart, making her feel lost and alone. Over time, these doubts began to build up, becoming more tangible and destructive. Ivan and Amina found themselves faced with a choice they couldn't make right away. Each of them realized that their relationship had reached a critical point, and that further actions could change their lives forever. They had to decide if they were willing to fight for their friendship despite all the difficulties, or if they would have to give in to societal pressures and their own fears. Ivan and Amina realized that their friendship was at stake, that their feelings and relationship had been put to a test that might prove too difficult for both of them. Internal doubts and disagreements caused by fear of public opinion and fear of hurting each other became a barrier that was difficult to overcome. They had to decide whether they could find the strength to continue together, or whether their paths would part, leaving in their hearts only the memories of a friendship that had once seemed so strong and unbreakable. After a long period of doubts and disagreements, Ivan and Amina, despite all the difficulties, began to realize that their bond had become more than just friendship. Societal pressures and inner fears continued to pull them in different directions, but their feelings for each other became clearer. They realized that their relationship, despite its external complexity, had a deep meaning and value that could not be easily ignored. Ivan, who had long been tormented by thoughts that he could harm Amina by his presence in her life, began to realize that these thoughts, though sincere, were the result of external pressures and his own fear of the unknown. He remembered how he had faced similar struggles in his youth when he had to go against public opinion for what was important to him. These memories became a source of strength for him, helping him to realize that his friendship with Amina had a right to exist, regardless of how it was perceived by others. Amina, in turn, also came to an important realization. Despite her youth and inexperience, she began to realize that her feelings for Ivan could not be defined by public opinion alone. With each passing day, it became clear to her that this friendship was not only a support for her in an alien world, but also a source of deep emotion and inner growth. Her fears and doubts about how their relationship might be perceived by others began to give way to a more mature understanding of her own needs and desires. The process of realizing that their bond was much deeper than just friendship was gradual and not without difficulty. Ivan and Amina began to discuss their feelings and thoughts more frequently, although these discussions were often informal and did not always result in definitive conclusions. They began to notice that their relationship was affecting them both, not only in terms of emotional comfort, but also in terms of personal growth and understanding of life. They realized that their bond was based on mutual support, respect, and a true understanding of each other, which is the foundation for any strong relationship. Each day they became more and more confident that their feelings for each other were real and important. These realizations began to strengthen their resolve to follow their hearts, despite societal pressures. They began to make a conscious effort to not let outside opinion destroy what they were building together. Although it was not easy, they realized that if they allowed societal standards and the opinions of others to influence their relationship, they risked losing what had become an important part of their lives. Ivan and Amina decided to focus on what they could control, their own feelings and attitudes towards each other. They began meeting more often, emphasizing their common interests and hobbies, which helped strengthen their bond and create new positive memories. These meetings became a true refuge from the outside world, a place where they could be themselves and openly express their feelings without fear of judgment. They began traveling together, exploring the neighborhoods around the city, attending cultural events, and simply enjoying time with each other. These moments of joy and discovery helped them strengthen their bond and dispel any remaining doubts. They realized that each trip they took together, each new tradition they created, became part of their unique history. Over time, Ivan and Amina noticed that they became less sensitive to the opinions of others. They learned to accept negative views and judgmental comments as an inevitable part of their journey, rather than an obstacle that could destroy their bond. They realized that their relationships do not depend on how they are perceived by others, but on how they themselves feel about each other and how they value that connection. Ivan became more confident in his decision, and his fears began to gradually diminish. He no longer saw social pressure as something that should determine his actions. Instead, he focused on how his friendship with Amina was making his life more fulfilling. This change in his perception was a significant step toward overcoming his internal conflict and accepting that his friendship with Amina had a right to exist. Amina, realizing that her fears about possible consequences and misunderstanding of others could no longer determine her actions, began to approach her interactions with Ivan with renewed energy and openness. She realized that if they both truly believed in their connection, that was the foundation for their relationship. She made a decision not to let fears and doubts rule her life and relationship. This new phase in their lives was a time of acceptance and growth for both of them. They learned to value their relationship not only for what it gives each other, but also for what it helps them grow as individuals. They realized that their bond was unique and valuable precisely because they overcame all the obstacles that stood in their way and were able to keep their feelings alive despite all the challenges. Ivan and Amina became more confident in their bond and began to make plans for the future in which their relationship had an important place. They realized that they still had many challenges ahead of them, but now they were ready to face them together, building on what they had built and on what they had learned to appreciate in each other. This new confidence and realization of their own strength became a source of hope and motivation for them to move forward despite all the external challenges and obstacles. After a significant amount of time spent in doubt and disagreement, Ivan and Amina came to an important realization that dramatically changed their perception of their relationship and fostered acceptance of their connection. They realized that their feelings for each other were not dependent on age differences, cultural differences, or public opinion. This realization was a pivotal moment for them to accept their relationship and openly declare it, despite all the challenges ahead. Ivan, who had previously suffered from fear of the possible consequences of his relationship with Amina, was finally able to free himself from internal pressures. He realized that age and cultural differences could not be a barrier to sincere and deep feelings. He remembered how many years ago, when he had a wife, he was not afraid to go against the current for the sake of his beliefs and feelings. This awareness helped him realize that in his present situation, he too should act in accordance with his sincere feelings rather than succumb to societal pressures. Amina, in turn, came to realize that her fears and worries about how their relationship would be perceived by others were nothing more than temporary obstacles. She began to see her feelings for Ivan as a source of inner strength and confidence, rather than something to be justified or conform to external standards. Amina realized that her cultural heritage and age could not determine how meaningful and true her feelings could be. They began to talk openly about their relationship, doing so with the realization that for some it might come as a surprise or even cause for judgment. The first steps toward openness were difficult, but they decided that it didn't make sense to hide their feelings any further. They began attending social events together, declaring their connection not only among friends and acquaintances, but also in the wider public space. The process of openly acknowledging their relationship was far from smooth. They faced disapproval and condemnation from a part of the public that still held traditional views and stereotypes. Many people still considered their friendship strange and inappropriate. When talking about their relationship, Ivan and Amina faced reproaches, whispers and even direct attacks from those who did not understand or accept their choice. However, despite this, they also found support from a few people close to them. These people, who truly knew them and understood their feelings, proved to be not only supportive but also a source of inspiration and reassurance. Ivan and Amina found comfort and strength in the circle of those who understood and valued their relationship. Their support became an important support for them during difficult times, helping them to maintain their belief in their connection and that their feelings mattered. Over time, they learned to accept the judgment and negative opinions of others as inevitable companions to their journey. They realized that while public opinion may be harsh and not always fair, it shouldn't define their own perception and the value of their relationship. Instead of spending energy fighting judgment, they began to focus on what really mattered to themselves. Ivan and Amina learned to find joy in their relationships and in the support they received from loved ones. They continued to build their lives around shared values, goals, and dreams. They developed their own traditions and moments that made their bond special and unique, despite all the external difficulties and challenges. They became actively involved in the community, emphasizing that their relationship could serve as an example of how sincere feelings and mutual understanding could transcend cultural and age barriers. They sought to show those around them that true love and support could exist and thrive despite external differences and biases. It was a time of growth and personal development for both of them. They began to see their relationship as something that transcended personal and societal limitations. They became a symbol of how you can resist stereotypes and expectations by following your own values and feelings. Ivan and Amina realized that their love and support for each other had become not just an important part of their lives, but a source of strength and inspiration for both of them. This realization was not only a personal achievement for them, but also a confirmation that true feelings can overcome any obstacles that society puts in front of them. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and they learned to appreciate and support each other despite all the trials they had been through. They continued to build their lives on mutual respect, love and understanding, and this became the foundation of their happiness and fulfillment. Ivan and Amina, having overcome all obstacles and doubts, decided to spend the rest of their lives together. They found happiness and harmony in their union, which became a source of joy and support for both of them. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and they began traveling extensively, discovering new horizons and immersing themselves in each other's cultures. These trips were not only an opportunity to expand their horizons, but also proof that true love truly knows no boundaries. Their adventures and new discoveries together strengthened their relationship, emphasizing that true love can overcome any differences and barriers.